Hey, HGW coming to you live once again. This is going to be a quick countdown of my favorite Tales from the Crypt episodes. But for those of you who don't know what Tales from the Crypt was, it was a show on HBO and it ran quite some years ago. And it had megastar power. In fact, even Hollywood's elite directed some of the episodes. You know, Tom Hanks did one, Michael J. Fox did one, I believe, and a lot of stars were in it. It seemed like the in thing to do, at the early 90s. After leaving HBO, it then decided to land on Fox and then even NBC. And when it landed on cable or broadcast, it was chopped all up to crap. You can still find a ton of these episodes on YouTube. And if you haven't seen it, what makes these episodes interesting was the fact that any act of violence portrayed by the or perpetrated by the main character is then brought back upon them, and it's sort of a morality issue. So, with that in mind, this will be, I think, a three-part video. So we're just going to delve right into it. We're going to start from season 1 and work our way up to the end of the season, picking out the best of the best episodes of Tales from the Crypt. Okay, first episode is episode number 2. It's called The Man Who Was Death, and it stars William Sadler, and I believe it was directed by Walter Hill. Walter Hill, of course, helmed a couple of the first episodes. He was also on 48 Hours. He did that movie, as well as Trespass, one of my favorite films of all time. Anyway, in this episode, not film, dog, right? In this episode, William Sadler plays Niles. Niles is the local electrician who got hired to be the guy that flips the electric chair for the state prison. But in this episode, what happens, guys, is that the death penalty is repealed and Niles is out of a job. So what does he do, guys? He goes around and he kills the people that he thinks should be put to death. In an ironic twist, he himself finds himself in the electric chair, and it pretty much sets the tone for the entire series as a morality thing. Like I told you just a second ago, that the violence perpetrated by the main character always comes back to get him in the end. That's thing 1. Now, that is season 1, and that was episode 2. Episode 3 is called "In All Through the House." Now, this is a Christmas sort of atmospheric episode, and basically what happens is a woman kills her husband on Christmas Eve. She also has a daughter. It is done by Robert Zemeckis, who did what, guys? Gremlins. That's right. And basically, it's directed by Robert Zemeckis and written by Fred Dekker. Now, Fred Dekker did the Monster Squad, guys, so you know you have a pretty cool episode. This episode is very chilling, and actually snippets of it appear on Lethal Weapon 3. If you haven't seen it, check it out. You'll see it in the first 20 minutes of the film. But in any way, this girl, like I said, she kills her husband on Christmas Eve. She also has a daughter. And she cannot call the police herself because the police would come back and implicate her for the murder. In a weird twist of fate, meanwhile, in the local mental asylum, an escaped lunatic dressed up like Santa wielding an axe shows up at her door. Meanwhile, her daughter sees Santa Claus. This story does have a twist, and it is actually in the movie The Vault of Horror, I believe. And it's very classic, and it's very well done, and it has a very cool twist. If you haven't seen it, that's episode 3, and All Through the House. Moving on. Season 2. This episode was directed by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's called The Switch, and it stars William Hickey. William Hickey was, of course, in the anthology movie, Tales from the Dark Side. What happens in this episode is that William Hickey, who plays an elderly man in the movie, because he is elderly, in the episode, goes on a scientific experiment type deal to change his appearance from an old withered man to a muscular studded beach guy. he does all that, spends countless amounts of money, so now he's out of money. And meanwhile, the person that is the what am I looking for? The source of this woman's attraction is rich. And it has a twist ending. Not really scary, but notable because it's directed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Alright, now we're at episode 9, season 2. This is by far one of the coolest and craziest episodes of Tales from the Crypt yet. It's called Cutting Cards, and it's done by Walter Hill. It stars Lance Henriksen, who was in Aliens, guys. Check it out. Anyway, longtime card sharks decide to see who's the better of everything. Gambling. You name the game, these guys are ready to throw down. First of all, they keep raising the stakes. The first stake is whoever loses a game, the loser has to move out of town. For good. The game, Russian roulette. Does anybody win? No, of course not. It's a Tales from the Crypt episode. We're going to get more morbid. Unfortunately, everybody goes through all 6 chambers. Nobody loses. They up the stakes again. A game of chop poker, which all ends up even. At the end of the episode, these two guys are still trying to figure out who's topping who by a game of checkers in a mental institution. Very cool, very clever, and very unique. In fact, it has one of the grisliest finger-chopping scenes you will ever see in it, and that's Cutting Cards, Season 2, Episode 9. Definitely give it a whirl. Alright. Season 2, Episode 20, guys. 20. If you ever wanted to know where the Crypt Keeper came from, there actually is an episode that will tell you that, and it's called Lower Berth, and it's about the traveling freak shows. And basically you see the Crypt Keeper, how he became to be born. He became born of a mummy and a two-faced man called Enoch. This episode is notable for a number of reasons. It's directed by Kevin Yager and written again by Fred Decker. They seem to have the horror market cornered on HBO, don't you think? So basically what happens, the mummy in this story has a necklace, and if you remove the necklace, you get cursed. It also frees the mummy from the curse. So when a local the local carnival barker decides he's going to take the necklace, it frees the mummy to run off with Enoch, and therefore creating parents and the Crypt Keeper, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry I paused on that. I was just trying to figure this out. You know, I have to have the competitive because there's so many of these things to go. I got to look down at this. Now we're moving to episode 19. This is notable because a few reviews ago I told you when Sid Haig died, I had a breakdown when Harry Anderson died. Harry Anderson is in this one. This is Corman's Calamity. And this is actually based off the comics, and it was one of the more original comics. It's based on Jim Corman. Jim Corman used to draw the creatures for Tales from the Crypt and Mad Magazine, believe it or not. So, any creature he draws is coming to life. Okay? So, his biggest source of inspiration comes from his bossy, nagging wife, played by Colleen Camp. She was a notable actress. She was on a few things. When a cop is on the trail of the grisly crimes and traces the murder to the cartoonist, then falls for him, the two decide to whip up a nasty creature on a sketch pad to permanently take his wife out of the picture. It's pretty classic. And again, it's written by Terry Black, directed by Roddy Harrington, who I've never heard of in my life. But Corman's Calamity, like I said, definitely pretty good. One of the more original Tales from the Crypts, and it was one of the first ones I ever read. That concludes part one. Stick around for part two.